Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're at. My name is Holly Rainwater, and I thank you for joining our Mastering Your DER Role number 3 webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about test exceptions. As a reminder, Spark TS is a third-party administrator. We do have clinic and on-site drug and alcohol testing, and we do compliance and policy development. We do the DOT, any of the Department of Transportation modes, and we have a software called Rail Tasker and People Tasker. That software helps manage your drug and alcohol testing compliance through our software solution. Our TPA team is myself, Holly Rainwater, Georgia Waddle-Bodle, Bowen Waddle, I can't even talk today. I think it's a Friday. And also Rachel Bob. We're all CDERs, and we are the TPA team here at Spark TS. Enough about us. I am really excited today. I've got two fantastic, not stuck with just me all hour long. I have two of probably some of the best DERs that I've met in my career. First, I have Heidi Caudill. You can't see her. She's behind the scenes. We're working on getting your camera. But Heidi is a compliance manager and certified DER representative at Norfolk Southern Railroad. And, originally, I had a different DER on, but she's ill. And Ashley Riley from Genesee and Wyoming, 20 minutes to prepare, and she said yes, and she's here with us. She's another amazing DER. She is the director and DER of compliance, alcohol, drug, and hearing conversations. So very lucky to have both of these fantastic DERs on our call today. Today we're going to be talking about non-negative DER, urine testing procedures, and some test exceptions. Okay, we all know that drug and alcohol testing isn't clear. The regulations are there, but outside those regulations, there are other things that could happen. And during the presentation, I encourage you to go to the type in any questions or comments that you have. Maybe you've had something that's occurred to you and you're like, did I do this right? Done something? Or you've been wondering, if this happens, what should I do? Put it in our questions so then we can bring up those questions during the webinar today and talk through them. But I really wanted to quickly bring up and talk about violations. Part 40 talks about our violations and breaks them down into different areas. We've got the use or possession of any controlled substance or alcohol when an employee is on or off duty subject to performing service for a carrier. That's a pretty black and white DOT regulation. If you report for service or remain on duty in service while you're under the influence of alcohol, if you have a 0.04 concentration of alcohol in your breath or blood, or under the influence or impaired by any controlled substance. Now I've got that or blood in there because FRA does have a carve out for FRA post-accident testing, and there is a blood component to that. But no other DOT mode has a blood component. Additionally, there's some other issues with alcohol that other carriers bring into place. For example, FAA. FAA says that within 4 hours of reporting for service, or FAA says 8 hours for a flightman or crew member cannot use alcohol. Most modes are 4 hours. FAA goes a little bit further and adds 4 hours on and says you can't use that 8 hours prior to. Additionally, FAA says you cannot use alcohol following an accident. Additionally, all DOT modes say you cannot use alcohol after reporting for regulated service. So there's some pretty cut and dry reasons and rule violations here. But another one that I'd like to talk through is refusals to test. There are lots of different refusals for test. Both Ashley and Heidi have some really great examples of refusals, but I wanted everybody to take a look at why we have refusals and really want to make sure that we understand who the decision maker is and why it's super important. If someone fails to appear for a urine collection, if they were failed to remain on site, if they don't provide urine, if they are failing to permit with an observed or monitored collection, if the employer says, hey, you need to take another, that could be a refusal to test. If they refuse to cooperate with the testing process, maybe they don't empty their pockets or wash their hands, or they're disruptive. Those type of things can be refusals. For an observed collection, if they don't raise or lower their shirts during that direct observation procedure, if they wear a prosthetic device, if they admit to the collector that they adulterated or tampered with the specimen, they fail to appear for an alcohol test. Again, all of those same with the urine. If they leave, if they don't provide enough saliva or breath, if they don't go through a medical evaluation, if they don't sign part 2 of the ATF, and if they fail to permit with the alcohol testing processes, all refusals. Then there's another category of refusals. That first category is all determined by the DER. Okay, and I know Ashley's got a great story about this, so I want to get to here in a quick second on why it's important for the DER to know and to make educated decisions here. There's also refusals that MROs will determine for us. If somebody doesn't provide enough urine, we go through that shy bladder process. The MRO makes that final medical determination. If someone doesn't go through that medical exam, the MRO can deem that a refusal. If someone adulters or substitutes a sample, that could be considered a refusal. If they admit to the MRO that they've adulterated the sample, again, another MRO-related refusal. Or if they don't provide enough breath and they go to that examining physician, it can be a refusal. But all of these at the beginning are refusals that the DER has to walk through. Ashley, not to pick on you immediately as a first person, but Ashley, can you tell us about the situation that you encountered where it's so lucky that you did get involved because you were able to make a very educated decision during that process?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a candidate go to do a pre-employment drug test, and then the paperwork was marked by the collection facility as a refusal. Upon further investigation and reaching out to that facility, we found out that the donor had made an attempt to provide a specimen, but was unable to do so. That put him in a shy bladder where he would have potentially a 3-hour wait. But the clinic closed within 15 minutes. They didn't want to allow that person to provide a specimen. They marked it as a refusal to test. But there were no notes in the remark section. I think that's why it's really important to call, find out more information before you proceed down the refusal route. And we're not using that clinic anymore either, because why would you take a candidate if you're not going to allow them to provide a specimen?
Did the chain of custody just come to you and it said refusal on it?
That's all it said, refusal to test, and that was it.
Keep that in mind when you're getting those chain of custodies that come your way and they see that, you're on notice, right? Because the collector, the regulations say that it's not the collector that makes that final decision. It's you and that DERC. Ashley, you did the right thing, right? Definitely to find out what the heck is going on. Heidi, I know you have another situation that is a little bit different. Can you talk through your refusal situation that we talked about earlier today?
Yes, I had an employee. I actually had an on-site collector for a collection for a random, and the employee told his manager, I have an emergency. And the employee left. The employee then texts the manager and says, hey, I've just left the hospital and I can come back and do the test. Of course, you cannot come and redo a test if you have left. Then I proceeded to call that employee to interview him to document what were the reasonings why you had an emergency, because there are reasons that you have to have in order to deem it. So it's not a refusal. The employee proceeded to tell me that they did not go to the hospital when I requested, can you give me the documentation that you were at the hospital with your family member? No documentation that he had, and he didn't even go to the hospital with his family member. At that point, I contacted the manager and said, hey, did he actually say that he was leaving the hospital? And he did, and it was a text. I instructed that manager, let's do a screenshot of it. Let me write this up because I'm going to deem it a refusal because there was no viable reason per regulation or emergency medical wise that this person had an excusable reason to leave and not do a test. And it was an automatic dismissal with no path back.
Great. And I know FRA has another carve out, right, for refusals. It's not just termination from the employer. It has a 9-month carve out. If you have a refusal, it's 9 months removal from regulated service too. If someone went from railroad A to B, there's that refusal situation. In both situations, you can see our DERs went in. It's not just black and white. They both went in, they did their research. Don't always take everybody's word for it. I hate to say that. We do want to, of course, trust our employees. But you can see in Ashley's situation, it was actually in the favor of the employee for Ashley to do what she needed to do because that clinic closed. But in the other situation, somebody's, oh, I'm going to the ER, this emergency situation, and they really don't. You can see how doing that due diligence can help both sides. Very good, very good. There are situations, right, that could occur that somebody really there is an emergency situation. But go to the hospital then, right? All right. And I'm seeing a couple questions come in the panel. We're going to get to those too. But also, I just wanted to note too, after violations, after this occurs, as a DER, you must provide an employee or applicant who refutes a DOT drug or alcohol violation a list of substance abuse professionals, okay? Even if you have a zero tolerance policy and you're giving that employee information to go to the SAP, you still need to provide them written documentation that you have provided that information. Even you have to do this for an applicant. Let's say you have an applicant who tests positive on an FAA test, okay? You still need to send that letter out that says, hey, you failed a DOT drug test. Here's your list of SAPs. That's a good thing to do in that regards. Ashley and Heidi, just to add on to that, in regards to those letters you're sending out after violations, how do you send them out? Are you sending them certified mail, email? How do you send out those letters?
We typically send those out certified mail. That way we have proof that went out to the applicant or to the employee or applicant.
Perfect.
We do certified as well, and except for the pre-employment side of it, if there's a failure, our system automatically sends them an email out to that process email that they're using to get all their information out, where they're at in the process and everything. It goes out, it's just an automatic reply, hey, this is where you're at and this is what you have to do per DOT.
Perfect, perfect. And you can't just go into a zip code locator and say, here's the one SAP, right? You have to provide a list of SAPs, more than one, or you can use a service provider, right? Like maybe your employee assistance program that has multiple SAPs under their umbrella. I'm a SAP here in Minnesota. You can't just write my name down. You would have to put down another SAP. That would be that person's substance abuse provider. And also in that return to duty process, there are steps that they have to take. You can't just give them that provider information. When they go to the SAP, there is a whole process that needs to happen. The SAP does a clinical evaluation. The SAP then will recommend treatment. The employee has to complete the treatment. The employee then goes back to the SAP. The SAP does an evaluation. Have they completed that follow-up treatment? Have they done what they needed to do? And then there's a return to duty drug test and or alcohol test. and then follow-up testing that has to be there. And that follow-up testing process, or the follow-up process and evaluation process, isn't cut and dry. It's based on that person's evaluation. Someone might have a severe problem, or they may determine that somebody doesn't. It all depends on the treatment or education of that person. I don't know. I used to get asked all the time, how long will this person be out? And you really just don't know. In addition to the Department of Transportation consequences, FAA has other consequences, like if you have issued a certificate by FAA, that could be revoked. If you have 2 or more positive tests, you'll permanently be disqualified. FRA, again, we talked about, if there's a refusal, 9 months removal from regulated service. Also, under the certification of FRA, if you have a positive alcohol test of a 0.04 or greater, there is a 9-month certification on a first violation that will suspend their certification, and that if there's a second violation, there's also additional ramifications there. That is expanding here in the next few months with dispatcher and signal certifications. Coast Guard has a carve out. Only credentialed crew members who have a verified positive drug test or verified refusal will take a drug test, will be subject to further action by a Coast Guard. And the clearinghouse. This is something here on November 18th. Remember what's going on? If someone's in the clearinghouse with a violation, their CDL will be downgraded if they have not passed those return to duty requirements. It's not just what's happening in Part 40, it's all of these other modes have different ramifications you need to make sure that you're aware of. Okay, let's get through the fun stuff. Okay, we talked about violations and what can happen. Let's talk about these situations that could happen. How about I pick on Heidi right away? Because I think Heidi and I talked a little bit about this. Heidi, what do you do if an employee admits to using alcohol 4 hours prior to their shift?
4 hours or less, they are automatically pulled out of service and are required to volunteer until results are given back to see if there's a charge.
You don't test in most cases?
Most cases we don't, but no, I'm just going to say we don't.
Yeah. And to come to that conclusion, you are asking a lot of questions. How do you come to that conclusion?
Coming to the conclusion 4 hours prior to their shift, it is typically if they know they're going to have a test or there is any suspicion there, it is the hopes that they will get out of not having to do a test. It's hard to say. Every situation is different on how it is handled, and when they do come with that admittance, hey, I have done this, I can't pinpoint it to just one thing for that piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
We handle it almost a case by case, but with consistency.
Perfect. Are you trying to get as much documentation and to build your case as possible on the front end?
I get as much documentation, document in order to protect yourself, protect your company, protect the employee, and for any hearings that you may have. Always, there's not a time that there is no documentation. It is always document something. And then coaching the manager, because you may not know what was said prior to, or the manager may have forgotten something when he was relaying the message as to what was going on, that they document everything. There's a lot of teaching with management, making sure that they're documenting what was specifically stated.
Perfect. And I want to reiterate to the group that, again, like Heidi said, these are case-by-case situations. What we're talking about here is we're talking in generalities, right? Not every situation is going to be treated the same, but you're going to treat them consistently, right? You're going to ask the same questions. You're going to go in because what we're trying to do is do the right thing. Again, for everyone, I like how Heidi said, for the company, for the employee, for the public, you want to do that right thing. And we're not saying, hey, the goal is to get rid of this person. We're doing the right thing for everyone in every situation. How about drugs? Who would like to take this one on? If someone admits to using drugs during a collection. Have either of you had this happen?
Yes, we have it quite often that they admit to doing some sort of a substance prior to that collection. They do complete that collection and they, on randoms, of course, they, and some of the other ones, but they do complete that collection. They are pulled out of service. They are required to voluntarily enter our DARS, which is our drug and alcohol rehabilitation group with our SAPs. And we also notify them that, hey, you're volunteering right now, but if a positive does come back, you will have a charge for whatever that violation is attached to a 219-102 under the FRA side of it.
You would test?
Yes.
Okay.
If it was a random, I'm specific.
If
it was a random, absolutely. That's where we have most of our admittance is prior to completing that random test, because we have some gentlemen who think that they want to do that tap on the shoulder and they panic and, oh, I've done something that it's going to get them out and they can just go into DARS and there's nothing that's going to be attached to their history in the rail industry. It's an automatic for a random that they do have to complete that test regardless of that admittance piece.
How about you, Ashley? Would you handle it the same way if you had an admission?
Yeah, I mean, for randoms, definitely. We've had that come up a couple of times. We definitely proceed with testing and then we pull them from service pending results, but we still have them go either through our DARES program, if it is positive, which is our second chance program, or for a program. And that's if we decide that this person should maintain employment. So yeah, same thing. I have had during a reasonable suspicion, it did come up during an audit. If somebody does admit when you're doing reasonable suspicion, that we should stop testing and just get a statement from that employee and have the manager make a statement that what the employee told them, and then to stop testing there because they did admit, because the ramification could be that it could come back negative. I did have that with suspicion.
Yeah. And truthfully, in my experience, I have the same thing. I probably would handle the random a little bit different. I would handle it just like Ashley handled the suspicion. If I had admission and I could get it like in writing before they even provided a urine, I would take that as a 101 violation, drugs on or off duty, because truthfully, that result could come back negative. But in these situations, you can tell they're handling every situation the same. That's the super important part, consistency. And you also see that their number one issue was to get that person out of service and to get them through their DARS or the SAP program to make sure that issue with that substance use or alcohol use is taken care of.
And Holly,
yeah.
I want to say that with, like you said, with if it comes back negative, even if we have an admittance and we have a result that comes back negative, they're already in our DARS program at that point as a volunteer. They cannot come back and backstep and say, oh, my test was negative, now I don't have to do anything. No, you actually admitted and you're going to continue through this through our company side of our DARS process.
Yes, yes. Good point. Because people do go out of work and say, I was on vacation 2 weeks ago and I smoked pot while I was out. And I know I'm going to test positive. Guess what? They don't, or they might not. But you still have admission, right? We go back to the regulations. No drug use on or off duty. Even though you're on vacation, you're subject to. So keep all of those things in mind. And I think we've got some questions coming in to the chat. Discuss FRA random driving to the clinic, and they admit they have no reasonable suspicions. Carrie, can you help me with the questions? I'm not sure if I'm catching them all. Was there just the one in here?
Nope, there's a couple more in here, Holly. The one you just read, yep, please discuss the FRA random, driving to clinic, and this person admits to using drugs and says this will show up positive. No RS sign symptoms.
Okay. So hopefully we answered that one. What were the other ones in here?
The next one was, can Ashley finish explaining what the next thing happened if it was not a refusal? What did she do?
For the one that was not a refusal, we just retested the employee. We had him go to a different clinic and do another pre-employment drug test at that time.
Okay.
Hopefully
Yeah,
that
and I
clears
think
up.
the important thing to remember, if you need that negative result, you need to go back and retest them. Yeah, good question, good answer.
Yeah, great. The next question, Holly, was the guest talks about volunteering. What does that mean?
We
go ahead,
have
Heidi.
a volunteer program and we have our federal required program. We have employees, if they feel like they have a problem with drug or alcohol abuse, they are allowed to volunteer for our DARS program because we have our SAPs are internal. We have a full group of people who assess people when they're needing to be assessed, but we also have our requirement as to if you have a positive, then you automatically have to go through that SAP process. But we do have internal DACs and SAPs. We encourage people to volunteer before having a non-negative test because we want to make sure that our employees are getting help and not waiting till that last minute of getting caught in a random reasonable suspicion or something. But we highly encourage employee volunteering and coworker referrals.
Good. Perfect.
That's what we have right now, Holly.
Okay, perfect. Keep them coming because we've got two experts here that can definitely help answer some of our situation. I think this is pretty close to what if it goes to the lab. I've had it both ways where people have admitted before they provide and then like right after they provide. Or a manager will go, they told me before they were going to test positive and I just let them continue and then it comes to my attention and the urine's already aroused. So we've talked through those things. What happens if the collector finds an adulterant? The collector calls you and says, hey, something just fell out of their pocket. What do you do as a DER? Ashley, if I called you, oh, sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
I did have one recently, a pre-employment candidate who the clinic actually did the drug screen before they did their physical piece of it. And the doctor saw the gentleman had left his boots on, but could see down in his boots. And there was urine in the boot. But they did not notify us until after the fact, after they had already sent the urine out for a collection to the lab and done a complete process. If I'd received the call before, hey, this is what we have found on this person, was this adulterant for pre-employment, I would have requested, since it's a federal test, that they do a collection under direct observation.
So what did you do? Like you found out?
Go ahead, sorry.
You found out after the fact, Heidi? Like everything was over?
Yes. Yes,
So
and they had documented urine in boot, everything, and that's what he used for his urine. And the clinic still sent it off. And of course, we're responsible for our collectors. Regardless that we pay them to do a job, we are responsible for it. We are liable for their mistakes. And Ashley said earlier, making sure that these clinics are doing the correct thing is huge, that they're following the rules or just do the right thing. We contact our clinics quite often just for if we just have that gut feeling there's something off. And there was something off on this one.
Did you test him again?
No, we did not.
That's crazy. Wow. That's a new one. I haven't heard that. They're urine in the boots during the exam. That's crazy.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had something very similar to her story where we had someone do a collection, but then they found a urine in their pocket during the physical. And then that's when we went back, but we did make that one a refusal to test because the physical was done at the same location, I'm sorry, as the urine collection. And that's why we made that a refusal to test in that scenario.
And I think this is why it's so important to have good relationships with your collectors, right? These collectors feel comfortable to call you, because the first thing really should be that collector's picking up the phone and letting you know what's going on, right? It's a lot harder when you find out after the fact, but then it allows you to at least act on it. How about if the collector finds an adulterant and the donor admits to tampering? That's actually covered under refusal. You can take that as a refusal. What I used to do, if the collector found something, I would say, did the donor admit to trying to adulter this with the sample or tamper the sample? And if they could get a yes to that, there's your refusal. Something to think through. Now we're going to go to, this is not DOT regulated, and there's 100 different scenarios that it could occur in these situations, but under your company policy, what if you become aware that an employee has alcohol in your company provided lodging? Maybe you've got someone away from their home terminal or away from their home location, and you find out there's alcohol in their room, or how do you handle that? Or maybe they're not answering their phone when they're supposed to be called to work. Have you had situations that have occurred, or how would you handle those type of situations? I know I personally had calls. I had gotten a call one time that somebody had gotten called for work, and over they kept calling this person and he wasn't answering his phone. Then they would call the front desk and say, hey, can you go check on this room? And they said, oh yeah, this person was in the bar till about 2 hours ago. When a manager had actually come over, went into the room and knocked. And when they went into the room, the person appeared to be passed out, and there was beer everywhere, beer bottles all over the room. We proceeded in those situations as a non-DOT because they hadn't accepted a call, but as a referral that they needed to go in and get an assessment. So I don't know if Ashley or Heidi would handle the situation the same. If you have somebody that doesn't answer the phone, or how would you handle a situation like this? Or maybe you haven't ever had this come up.
Oh, yeah. I've had similar things that with hotel problems, but the first thing that's always asked when you get that call is, did they accept call? That's the big thing, to make sure you are doing that correct test. Did that person accept the call? And with an employee, we would do a federal test if they did accept that call. This is an FRA, came directly from the FRA for our maintenance of way guys that are traveling out there, our mechanical guys that are traveling out there around, that are in a hotel and they don't answer their call. They just don't answer a phone call. They don't show up to work and they're not answering a phone call, but they have scheduled work days, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if their scheduled work day is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they don't answer, they've not shown up to work, they go to the hotel, they can't get a hold of them. It's after 6 a.m. and they go in and they finally answer the door, then we would do a federal test per the FRA. That's anyone that has not accepted a call, engineer and conductor, that would be anyone else. That was something that we did change up on that side of it, because they were telling us that it was required to do a federal test if whatever their work time was on those guys.
Good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. Yeah, if they've accepted their call, that should then become federal. Or, right, correct me if I'm wrong, my shift, I'm away from home and my shift is 6 to 2 and it's 6:05 and I'm not there and you go up to my room, that's my normal shift. I've accepted that duty, right? I should be tested federally.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think the key is you're on notice, right? How about this one? Here's a fun one. I've had this happen before. What if you become aware an employee's hotel room smells like marijuana? What do you do? The clerk, maybe the hotel clerk says, oh my gosh, the room smells like marijuana. What do you do? This is a hard one, right? Because you're not like pinpointing there's a joint in the room and those type of things. We've done things like run key logs, who's been in there, pulled security camera footage. But I think at that point, you're really on notice, right? As a DER, if you've become aware of that, you need to immediately get reasonable suspicion testing done. Go on and see what's going on out there. Was this person smoking marijuana? You're going to want to make sure, hey, did this person, do they have signs and symptoms of drug use? I don't know, Ashley or Heidi, if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I would just say we've done what you've done in the past. We just get a manager on site, do signs and symptoms, and go from there.
Yeah, we do the same thing with the signs and symptoms. And if there's no signs and symptoms, then we recommend to that manager to be attentive and do what we call real G checks on that employee for the next 30, 60 days. Just be a little bit more situationally aware of that person just to see what's going on, if there is that possibility.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I think is great, that we are all trying to do the right thing, right? We're being diligent. We're asking the questions. We're being observant. We're not blaming. We're doing it the right way. And I think that's, if you're consistently doing that, I think it's definitely a huge thing. And I think too, when we're doing these investigations, I've pulled video camera footage. Some of the things I've seen on video camera footage of my employees doing is absolutely insane, from people running down the hall, falling outside and getting hurt naked, crazy things that have happened. There's a lot of things when you're doing your investigation you can really pull into play. Carrie, how's our questions in the chat? Do we have any new questions that have come in?
No, we are good right now, Holly.
Okay, keep the questions coming. I think that's really helpful. How about if we look at shy bladder and shy lung? Do you have special procedures that you've brought into place to help avoid getting you into any of those situations?
Yes, I can go. I do have special procedures for shy bladder. I have it set up in my protocol that the collector give me a call at the 2-hour mark. At that time, I call my on-site manager and I talk to the employee directly just to let them know what the consequences are if they're unable to provide a specimen within 3 hours, and also talk to them about what next steps would look like. Fortunately, out of all the time, I've done that several times. I've only had one person where they actually did have true shy bladder. Other than that, everybody else has been able to provide a specimen by that 3-hour mark. And I think it's really important because I don't think, and what people tell me is when I tell them, hey, XYZ, and if you're unable to provide medical documentation about this, would be marked as a refusal. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. If I can't provide a specimen in 3 hours, it's a refusal. I think it's important to lay out the consequences of not being able to move forward. Seems to help.
Very good. Heidi, do you do something similar?
We do the exact same. Speak with that employee and everything when it comes down to, when you're getting down to that last mark of the race. But with our shy bladder and our shy lung, we are between our DOT and our company. Our company mirrors what the DOT requirements are. That way there's no confusion and we're consistent across the board with how we're treating everybody, and we don't get lost in translation of doing something completely different for our non-DOT testing versus our DOT testing. We do mirror what the DOT requirements are, along with our additional add-ins, like Ashley said, calling and speaking to that employee and letting them know the facts of how things roll out past the point of not giving a sample.
I love that. Keep that in mind. That's definitely a great thing. You don't need to carve out a whole different set of regulations for your company testing. Again, consistency, doing the same thing. And I'm going to echo what Ashley and Heidi said. Calling at that, having your collectors call you at that 2-hour mark it's just changing. It will change the outcome of your test, because you don't want to deal with the refusal situation any more than that employee does, because they're very difficult and they're very time consuming. Letting the employee know, hey, here's the ramifications. I'd even go so far as, what can I do to help you provide a sample? Let's get you walking around. Let's get you drinking that water. Sometimes people are just really worried, right? They're like, oh, I don't know. And if you say, I'll give you 5 more minutes, sometimes that just is the difference. And there's also the other part where you talk to the collector. Make sure they have followed all of the procedures. I've had situations where I've gotten that call at hour 2, and guess what? They didn't make the attempt over the threshold for their first attempt. What they said was the first attempt wasn't the first attempt, because an hour later, when they actually took the cup, went into the restroom, that was their first attempt. Make sure that you're talking to the collector too. Did they follow the regulations like they're supposed to? That once you start doing those type of things, it really does make a huge impact on your program.
And Holly, can I add that make sure, like Ashley said, you may not have many, but document your shy bladders, keep a spreadsheet or something. If it was a viable reason for shy bladder, shy lung, or not, anything, because we've come up here recently with quite a few shy bladders, but we've also had EEO claims where they said we didn't do something correctly, or we don't treat everybody the same when we do. And we have that documentation. You've had this many pre-employments, this many randoms, those types of things that we can give to our legal department that says, hey, we have treated everybody equally, and this is what our numbers look like over the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Perfect. That's a very good call out. Definitely. I think, again, I'm going to say it again, consistency. You can see that we're not just pulling stuff out of our pockets here and say, this is what I want to do. Consistency, documentation of your procedures, of your results, all those things will make a difference to your program, and definitely ensure that you can keep it compliant. Let's talk through maybe a he said, she said concern, okay? Maybe let's say that I work for your company and my husband calls you and says, oh, I just need to tell you, Holly, she's been snorting Coke for 6 months and she's crazy. Okay. Hopefully he would never call, because I'm not snorting Coke or anything crazy. But if he did, how do you handle those situations? I'm a regulated employee. What do you do? Oh, they know me so well, they know I don't do cocaine.
I say for us, what we've historically done is we just monitor, keep an eye on the employee. We don't so much take referrals from spouses. We have it listed in our plan that we would take it from employees or managers as a referral, but we would monitor the employee, talk to them, maybe have a conversation.
Good. I think it's important to have that conversation too. If you're not suspecting signs, you don't see the signs and symptoms, but to let them know, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? Maybe that person is having an issue, but maybe it's something different and you can get them help. It might not be substance abuse help. It could be that they're going through a divorce and they just need some emotional support, and you've got things that can help that. So there could be something, there might not be, but it might not be substance use. I think it's to have those hard conversations is important. Good call out. Great. Okay, I'm going to say we don't have any other questions that are still there, Heidi. We're still good? Or Carrie, I'm sorry.
Right. We have answered all the questions that have been submitted. Thank you to everybody.
Perfect. Well, and unless Heidi and Ashley have anything they want to add, I wanted to talk through maybe what happens after if you've violated a DOT rule, do you lose your job? Because I've dealt with many employers that after a violation, sometimes it's termination, sometimes it's done. Other times there's what's called a second chance, where somebody is given a second opportunity to go through, get the rehabilitation, and then come back to work. And again, that's all at the discretion of the employer. DOT is silent. The regulations are silent on any employment decisions in regards to that. You may be prohibited from doing any DOT work for a certain amount of time, but that termination component or an employment opportunity, employee requirement for employment is gone. Can you talk through, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with your company, but maybe what you've heard on second chances or any things that you may have witnessed in regards to employers using a second chance agreement?
Yeah, so here at D&W, we used to be zero tolerance. Then through the pandemic, we decided that we wanted to start a second chance program. Since about 2021, we've had a second chance program where employees meet certain criteria, and based on all the facts of the violation, they may be afforded the opportunity for a second chance. We've seen a lot of success with that. People are very grateful for that opportunity, and they go through the return to duty, the SAP process, the return to duty process, and then they're on typically a follow-up program. But yeah, we've seen a lot of great success with that. And then the nice thing about it too is because we have employees that have been with us a long time, to retain that knowledge in those employees, I think is where you win. Because what happened with the pandemic is we were hiring people from other railroads that had a violation, but not giving our own employees that opportunity. It's been really good to see that change.
Great. Great. And do they
We're
sign?
similar to Holly.
Huh?
We call it the bite of the apple. You get one bite of the apple, and we'll let you go through the process through DARS, whether it's voluntary or a DOT positive Rule G violation. And you'll get that one time to go through the program. You can volunteer as many times though. And we also have, with any type of refusal, it's an automatic dismissal with no path back. We don't offer that to any refusal results.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot. And they look at that as also a rule violation or an insubordination, right? A little bit. Sometimes those refusals they're handled a little bit differently because of the refusal itself.
Yeah.
And I think also to reiterate that just because you're signing that second chance, you're not dismissing the charge, right? There's still going to be that charge. If, like, for example, if you do a waiver for FMCSA, it doesn't take you out of the clearinghouse. You're still in the clearinghouse. If you are, doing a waiver for FAA, if you still get a second violation, that's going to remove any of that required certification. If you've got that medical component, that affects that. Conductors and engineers, if you have a violation for alcohol, you're out 9 months, even though whether or not you have that second chance on your file. Those type of things, again, it's consistency, doing the same thing over and over. Good. And a lot of people, I think what I'm seeing is most of the time that those second chance waivers, people aren't getting paid while they're out of service. They're still getting assessed discipline. And I don't know, do you have a certain time off requirement in second chance? I think I've been involved where we've done at least a minimum of 30 days out of service. They're going to at least serve that. Have you seen timelines in any of your agreements or agreements you've heard of?
To make ours clean and neat, it is consistent across the board. We mirror what the Department of Transportation does. 9 months, the same thing goes across the board for company and DOT. We mirror that piece. That way there's no confusion. It's consistent across the board for everyone. And the purpose, from my understanding, that it was done prior to my start at NS was they had people who were complaining that, hey, I've had a positive breath test and I only have to be out 9 months, but that guy had a positive drug test and he gets to come back because there's nothing that says, all it says is you just have to have an evaluation and come back. We made it a consistency across the board for everybody to be treated the same in a regulated position and a non-regulated position.
That makes sense.
And then I'd say for us, we don't have a prescribed time off. It's just based on how fast or how quickly someone completes the, I'm so sorry, the STAT process is what we do.
Good.
If it's not an alcohol violation.
Perfect. That makes sense. That makes sense. When you have, I know I used to talk to people like after they'd have their violation when we were doing that second chance. Do you have conversations with your employees? I know I would say literally that, hey, this is your last chance. Take this seriously, get the help that you need, because I didn't want people to skim through it and do the minimum requirement. I mean, you're out. I would be like, take advantage of this. This is your chance to rehabilitate. Do you have conversations like that? Or maybe your DARS group does? Ashley or Heidi, how do you feel about that?
I say, no, I totally agree. We definitely encourage employees to take this time to get whatever help that you feel you may need at that time. That is a conversation had with the employee.
We have started, we've started the education at the very beginning. And when I say the very beginning, it's in training. We actually go, myself and one of my teammates go and speak to these new employees and let them know what type of testing is, because it's not just pre-employment. You've got a lot of people that don't realize at some point you're going to get tested. If it be random, reasonable suspicion, cause, whatever you have out there going on, company or federal, it's going to happen. Be attentive of it, letting them know what the state laws are and how it does not matter that you can't smoke marijuana. We are trying to educate that up front. I combine my training with the DARS program where they come in and speak about what they do and how we merge in together to work together. But the education out of the gate, just because of the increase in positives in the states that have marijuana use, because a lot of people don't get that, hey, I can't use I can use marijuana because the state says it, but when the federal part is trumping that piece of it. We're being more proactive on the education piece, getting in front of people out of the gate and letting them know that we're there and contact us and don't do it, because at some point you will be tested. It's not just a pre-employment test that you're attached to.
Good point. Great. See how easy our jobs are, right? I'm not seeing, I don't care if you see any questions in the chat. I haven't seen anything else come in.
No, I have not either.
Ashley or Heidi, do you have anything that you guys would like to add today?
I just document. That is the biggest thing. And that is for even if you have union agreements or if you don't have union agreements, document everything. Just as it's easy. There's so many tools out there now. Back in the day when we all started doing this, it wasn't that easy. It was pen to paper, but there's so much out there. Just document everything, because there's so much in our drug and alcohol world that all of us as DERs, and it doesn't matter what modality you're part of, there's a lot going on and a lot of changes and people are doing a lot of strange things. Just make sure to document.
Yes. And I just want to also clarify that, you know what, these are the events that we talked about today. Everything is based on what's happening at the time of that event, right? That we're trying to get as much information that you possibly can during these events. And always be consistent. Don't sway from that consistency. That's when you start to get into trouble. And you can see both Ashley and Heidi, consistency rang through, consistency. The minute you waver, that's when the problems start. Document. If you don't know, pick up the phone. Somebody, I always say, call a friend, right? If I had a question, I wouldn't be afraid to call Ashley. I wouldn't be afraid to call Heidi. I would ask that question because, gosh, sometimes you just need to talk it through too. I know I've had things it's like, I just could talk to somebody. Oh yeah, I'm going to call Heidi and walk this through. Use those opportunities. That's why we do what we do, because we want to grow our of DERs. I want to thank everybody, especially want to thank Ashley and Heidi for joining us today and for answering all these hard questions and scenarios. They really do have two of the best here on the phone on today's webinar with us. And I want to thank everybody for joining. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us here at Spark TS. We will have other DER webinars coming up. Please let us know what you want to hear about. Check out our website at www.sparkts.net for past webinars and for more information about the services and software that we have here at Spark TS. I want to thank everybody for joining and have a great day.